Participate in this section. Charter students are eligible to try out at a non-charter school to participate in the extracurricular activity. And Mr. Chairman, we just changed the amendment to from the Department of Education to the association shall make rules and establish Section 30, and we'll be talking about this in the Q&A, but the easy way to describe Section 30, Carter will report me on this, that it's a very simple equation. The money simply follows the child. The money is fractioned out in the equation of the MEP formula and the local tax dollars. And that amount is fractioned out, and that money goes wherever that child goes. And I'm sure we'll be discussing that in the question. Section 31. Generally accepted accounting principles. They should annually engage in external audits. Transportation funding and provision. The state shall disperse state transportation funds to charter. They may enter into contracts with district or private providers for transportation. Section 31 is very important. Public charter school facilities. They shall have equal access to all of the existing state facilities. Charter schools shall have a right of first refusal to purchase or lease at or below fair market value closed public school facility or property. A public charter school may negotiate and contract that or below fair market value with a school district. Section 35, charter contract. Charters may operate to the expiration of their term regardless of the repealer. Section 36, repealer July 1, 2020. Section 37 is the Teacher's Licensure Code section. And there is a line that is inserted. I'm sure my numbers will be different in this one for the underlying section. Shall not apply to any teacher, instructional staff, or administrator of a public charter school. Section 38. The criminal background check code section. Any teacher, instructional staff, administrator shall adhere to the criminal background check and fingerprinting requirements. Section 39. Education Employment Procedures Act. Looks like it's following the same language. Shall not apply to any category of teachers, administrators, or employees of the public charter school. Members of this body, Section 41, Section 40 and 41 are repealers of existing law. And when we're dealing with Section 42 and Section 43, MAEP formula and 43, the local taxes for the school district. These sections have to be brought forward. The actual House Bill 888, so the money will actually follow the child. Section 44, some information is self-explanatory, survivability of provisions. And Mr. Chairman, on section 45, there may need to be a change on that. Okay, he's changed it here, sorry. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes the a brief summary of definitely a moving target.
Okay, gentlemen, has gone section by section. Does anyone have any particular questions that you would seek to be recognized to ask? Yes, sir, gentlemen.
Pretty lengthy. I've got 5 questions.
Okay, well, we have time, but if there's a question that needs to be asked tonight, I don't have to interview like really late.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How will students be accounted for if a transfer occurs to a charter school and then back to a regular private public school?
That's a very good question. There will be the equation that the money will follow the child in simple format today. But if I'm to understand your question correctly, you're asking that if that child is enrolled in a charter school, mid-term, the child leaves that school and then reverts back to the traditional structure. I would defer that to Todd. You can't keep the money. That's the short answer.
Yes. Short answer is I don't know. In a public school, it doesn't work like that. MAEP, we calculate, based on prior years, it's 2 and 3 ADA. The school district is funded for the upcoming year based on that. So if you have a child leave one public school, the next year go to another public school, there's no transfer of funds. So I don't have an answer to
Thank you. You'll probably have the same situation if you're actually attending the school district in your county, and then in the middle of the year the family moves to another district. You have the same situation there where the money's not going to flow till the end of the year or the beginning of the next year, whatever time the funds are actually allocated. So, some point in time we might want to say that you can't move. Of course, you have a situation for family has to move, they have to move.
That's a very good question.
Okay. Next one, will charter school students be subject to the same statewide test that the non-charter public schools are?
They're subject to the exact same accountability standards. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't bother me a bit to actually make them have to reach a higher bar. But, they're not going to have any loopholes on that either.
What if a student is dismissed from the charter school because he's not living up to his contract? Will the other public schools around that area have to pick him up?
Could very easily, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
obviously, because that school has to have it anyway. And if he actually goes to a charter school, then it's just going right back to where he was. There are some very specific contracts with the parents and the children in the charter schools.
Right. I understand that. And what I wondered about, if you had a lot of those transfers, it would be detrimental to the schools. If there weren't a lot, it might not be. But that would also, one of the things there I'm also thinking about is we don't want the charter schools to take the cream of the crop.
And to the representative, if you look at all of the statistical information, it clearly hasn't happened, especially if you look at the KIPP charter school, the West Helena, Arkansas, that was the bottom of the barrel that they had received. But at the same time, I would be interested in the authorizing, making sure that you just can't kick a child out for disciplinary problems or whatever. You got to take the good with the bad.
Why are we exempting teachers and principals from circumstances?
Well, let's just say this. The charter school itself could easily have a a doctor from the University of Mississippi who wants to participate, but they clearly won't have that particular certification. But you don't want to waste that type of talent and let it slip away. So again, we want to train them to be proper teachers too.
And one final question. I'll get into sports. I'd like to be done with basketball right now. But in this saying that the schools can participate in NA, NHAA, SHA, athletic competitions, what will keep the charter school from recruiting athletes?
Well, I guess this is where this was brought to my attention just recently on this aspect. It's definitely it's a necessary angle that we need in the charter school. At the same time, if there's a kid in the charter school that outperforms a guy in the public high school team, that child's going to be brought in. So it's going to be the same as just being competitive.
The law is not going to allow a charter school to go just be very selective about it. They can't go out there and pick the number one running back or number one quarterback in the school district if you have multiple schools. It's tied to this part of the charter school. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Thank you.
Okay. And gentlemen, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions and comments. First of all, I'd like to commend the gentleman from Montgomery County College of Education. This is a very contentious issue here. But I want to have someone explain to me what makes a charter school better than a public school, given that they obviously are not on the same playing field, because you have exempted teachers and administrators. What makes them, do you have any statistical data, not anything, statistical data to say that these schools outperform the public schools across the United States? And I know there are, data out there sometimes it may be, it just depends on what side of the fence you're on, what data you provide. But it appears that what we're doing here is contracting out education. Tell me, in your estimation, what makes a charter school better than a public school when they're given the same opportunity? When they're on the same level playing field, obviously they're not on the same playing field because you've made some allowances for charter schools that you haven't made for public schools.
Well, I guess we just differ in the opinion, and here's why. I guess it's as simple as the piece of autonomy versus accountability. And I say the accountability piece far exceeds the autonomy structure that the charter school is allowed. I mean, it's obvious because you can close the school down. And right now, we have rogue public schools right now that are still open. Rogue public schools. And they consistently produce failure. You can't close them down. Now, you can come back with conservatorship, but there's the other argument on that side that says the conservatorship doesn't even work anymore. So, I view it as a breath of fresh air, but that's just an opinion. But the other parts that I would say to your point is that, maybe it's good that we were dead last for some of this time. Louisiana, Arkansas, and Tennessee all have charter legislation. And maybe by watching their failures, as we drafted this particular piece of legislation, we actually put benchmarks, firewall in there to protect the schools itself. So we will only get the best of charter schools to arise in the state of Mississippi. So that's like one of the strongest pieces that I need to tell you there. And then I guess what makes it better on a national scale, if you look at charter schools, let's just say there are 5,000 charter schools, only 17% of those closed. That's a far better ratio than your public school structure right now. And then if you use the, how many kids actually graduate? You just, again, I hate to keep using Arkansas for an example, but their poverty rate is just ridiculous. It's almost twice average. in this particular West Helena, Arkansas. And I mean, they had a graduating class, the 5th grade class. They had like 200 students. Only 15 of those kids left the process through the entire duration of becoming seniors. And guess what? 15 from 200. They all graduated and they had college scholarships. So I would differ with you on your assessment on how you view charters, because I view them as a new way of doing business, and it's not like a magic wand. It's not. I mean, charters are just no more than like a magnet school or any other IB program. This is just another tool in the toolbox, and we should have that in this.
Okay, so I'm not against the charter school concept. But what I'm saying is, it's almost like putting a mule in the Kentucky Derby. You ever seen a mule run with a thoroughbred? Because they're not on the same playing field. I'm saying, when you take this piece of legislation and you make allowances for one group over the other, quite naturally, the other group is going to be successful. Because you've given, it's almost like if we run the 100-yard dash and you give me a 40-yard head up, I'm probably not going to beat you.
I still disagree. The accountability the accountability aspect of this legislation is far more robust and rigorous than the public charters than the public schools right now.
You can
shut a charter school down.
Okay, yeah, you can shut a charter school down, and you're probably going to shut a lot of them down in 5 years. But can you tell me what makes it better by virtue of the fact that they're not on the same playing field? Because remember, you made allowances here that you haven't made for this bill says that we're contracting out education to someone or some groups that we think can provide better education services than the people we have in the state.
Let me just say this, and I think we're just going to differ on opinion on this. And I mean, that's fine. But statistically speaking, they just simply do outperform your public school. That's just across the board. Across the board. And then by us enacting this type of legislation that we've seen where Tennessee and Arkansas have made mistakes, we will prevail in making sure that we provide those necessary firearms. And guess what? It's my hope, and I guess now I'm interjecting a personal opinion now, that once we bring charters into Mississippi and they're allowed to have a track record, guess what I believe that has? I believe that you will see the Department of Education, and if that's a template, then we may need to use those templates, and you may never see a need for another charter school in Mississippi.
So my question now becomes, if you did the same thing for the State Department of Education that you're doing for these charter schools, why wouldn't the State Board of Education schools in the state perform at the same level?
If you look at their numbers, Representative, their numbers are complete failure in the state. We're still 50 to 47 mathematics, reading. It's just, I just think it's different. So I can't.
One other question, Mr. Chairman. How many schools are going to be affected? We're talking about successful schools on down. Approximately, how many schools are we talking about that will be affected by it?
I don't have the exact